Welcome, everybody, to another exciting edition of US Law Live, the official podcast of the US Law Network. I am your host, Michael Judy, with the Dysart Taylor firm in Kansas City, Missouri. I am flying solo from the host duties today, but I am very excited for our guest today, Stan Evans from the Gerber Ciano firm in Buffalo, New York. Hello, Stan. How are you?
Michael, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I probably should have clarified this first, but do you go by Stan or Stanley?
Either one is fine. Stanley, it's a little long, a little formal, but I will respond to that as well as
Yeah,
Stan.
I get that with Michael and Mike. My knee jerk is I always introduce by Michael, but then people always call me Mike and they ask if I mind. And I said, the only person who really gets offended if you call me Mike instead of Michael is my mother because she says, I named you Michael and that's what I'm going to call you.
Gotcha.
So you're probably a little bit in the same boat.
Yeah.
So how
Yes.
are things going in Buffalo?
Going well. Having finally some warm weather for us. It's been it was a rough, cold winter, and enjoying the fun and the sun and everything that goes along with it. So.
Yeah, I mean, what's the summer in Buffalo? What's 80 degrees? Is that a heat wave up there? Or do you still get pretty hot in the summers?
We get pretty hot. Fortunately, the lakes cool us down usually a little bit. It's usually quite beautiful in the summer, but I think with everyone else, we had a pretty intense heat wave over the last week or so. So
I know in the Midwest, things were relatively mild here until about 2 weeks ago, and we went from what seemed to be the high 70s, low 80s to now you're in the mid 90s and it's sweltering and it's humid and it's just miserable.
yeah, bring back the cold weather is what we're
Yeah,
demanding.
yeah. Well, before I know you're on today, we're going to get into some workers' compensation issues and something that I'm not, intimately familiar with. I know just enough to be dangerous, but I guess before getting to that, give us a little bit about your background in the law. You know, how you got it with Gerber, kind of your background, what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so I went to law school in Buffalo, the University of Buffalo Law School, and graduated. And right off the bat, I got a job in a workers' compensation defense firm. And I have been practicing since 2012 exclusively in workers' compensation for my entire career. And so I've been at various defense firms. I was also in-house at an insurance company for a short time as well at a captive firm, which was an interesting and enlightening experience before my firm started. And a few attorneys called me up who had been at another firm I was with prior and said they're starting this firm. I said, wow, what an exciting opportunity. Um, uh, Joined right at the beginning of 2018 and have enjoyed it ever since.
So you got in right before COVID took over and at least got your feet in the door.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And you know what's kind of interesting about COVID was the Workers' Compensation Board in New York State was actually kind of ahead of a lot of other areas as far as the virtual format goes. We had been transitioning to a virtual format and virtual hearings before the pandemic began. And when the pandemic hit, it was just kind of accelerated that, but they had all the systems in place and were actually able to transition quite well into that environment.
And before, as they were getting that stuff set up before COVID, were you finding that lawyers were pushing back on it of, hey, I don't want to do things by video, I want to be in person?
A little bit, and I had been in long enough that I don't want to say I was pushing back against it, but I thought, we're gonna lose a little bit of the camaraderie of the workers' compensation bar by not being there in person, not, having those conversations out in the hall, et cetera. And I think to a certain extent that has been true. We are not as familiar with each other on a personal level, but at the same time, it is much more efficient. I can appear at quote unquote appear at various hearing sites
Right.
in a single day, whereas before I had to, just appear in Buffalo, for example, or just appear in Jamestown, New York, which is, southern New York, for a single day. But now I can be in multiple places at
Right.
once. Yeah.
Right. And when you were in law school and just starting out, did you always want to do work comp, or was it just the kind of the way things worked out? And as most of us in our careers, you go where you're told, but did you ever think you were going to be doing work comp when you were in law school?
Well, so when I was in law school, how I got into workers' comp is actually in law school. I was applying for various basically summer internships or summer clerkships around Buffalo, and one of the firms I applied for was an exclusively workers' comp defense firm. I had no idea that that's what it was, but when I went for the the interview, they said, "Well, we're a workers' compensation firm," and I frankly had to go home and look up what workers' compensation was. Um, so I
Right.
really didn't know it existed. But that being said, it's once I started working in that area, it was quite interesting. You touch all sorts of industries, you do all sorts of things. It's very um, improvisational in a lot of ways because you're showing up at hearings and running into issues just on the spot, and it can be a lot of fun in the way it's practiced.
Right. And I was also intrigued. You said you were in-house for a little bit. I myself was in-house I do a lot of transportation work and was in-house with a trucking company. But what intrigues me is what brought you back? What made you come back to the private side of things?
Yeah, so I mean what brought me back was basically the attorneys at the firm I'm with now, Gerviciano, basically called me up and said we're doing something kind of exciting and new. And while working for an insurance company, a large insurance company is certainly stable and rewarding in its own ways. I thought, well, I don't know if I'm going to get many chances to be on the ground floor of a
Yeah.
new firm, and it's good. I knew it was going to be exciting, no matter what, and it was. I mean, it was a lot of fun, figuring everything out from the ground up.
I'm sure you probably have some days like I do, which I'm like, why did I go back to the billable hour, keeping time tickets, wanting to pull my hair out and, have the more 9 to 5 in-house life.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I know again, we talked about you do the work comp stuff, and that's what you've been handling for your entire career. Um, is there a specific industry that you focus on with the work comp, or is it just any and all industries?
Yeah, well, it's any and all industries. But with that said, a lot of my work now is in construction and PEOs, professional employment organizations, as well as a fair amount of hospitality as well. But those are the areas I do a lot of my work in.
And is there one of those industries that you find, more unique or complex than the others?
Yeah, I mean, construction claims in New York are quite interesting, both on the actual claim level as well as the global I guess the global level. What I mean by that is basically how the workers' compensation component fits into the overall construction industry and basically the global claim the oh, I don't know, general liability
Right.
portion, et cetera, because construction claims really have a lot of different components. You're much more likely to see that general liability piece to it, and you're also much more likely to see kind of some interesting insurance programs that wrap all of these up together. They're wrap programs
Right.
that wrap all of these up together, and you have a lot more players and a lot more interests you need to consider, not just the we've got a workers' compensation claim and we're going to go through the life of the claim and try to close it as quickly as possible. There's more factors at play.
Gotcha. And is on the lines of You may not be dealing with this particular claim, but this with this particular individual, but you've also have business concerns and other more, I guess, business to business, contractual concerns that are at play too. About you may win the battle on a particular work comp piece of it, but you could lose the war from relationships and other types of project management.
Yeah, that is certainly true. In addition, when you have a large construction site and someone gets hurt or someone files an occupational disease case, the word of that can kind of spread throughout the site, and you end up exposing yourself, or not exposing yourself, but you have the potential for something like that to spread a lot more. In
Gotcha.
addition to that, when you have multiple lines of litigation, not just workers' comp, but also general liability going, there's a lot of information coming in for a lot of reasons into both files, and whether or not those defenses can be coordinated and coordinated successfully, both on the litigation piece as well as wrapping it up through settlements in the lien
Gotcha.
process, is unique and provides a lot of levers for the defense side.
Gotcha. And I've done just enough construction to be dangerous, and I know when you're dealing with the liability side, there's all these fights of, well, who's this person's real employer? Is it this employer a statutory employee? Is it a statutory employee? There's hats can get mixed. Does that impact the work comp realm as well?
It certainly can. It can fighting about basically the employer-employee relationship, whether or not this employee was leased or a quote unquote special employee of this other employer. In addition to that, uh, particularly on sites which are smaller and or do not have uh, stacks of insurance, you can get into situations where subs do not have insurance for workers'
Gotcha.
compensation claims, and that flows up the chain, at least in New York State, under workers' compensation law, section 56, to the next contractor and up and up and up until you find coverage.
Right.
So there's a lot of interesting and fights about that.
Right. And I'm sure when you start trying to map out what company is doing what and who's working with whom, it almost turns into one of those law review, excuse me, bar exam questions that it's okay, I need to map this out and start writing this down and get it all figured out.
Exactly, yeah. And there can be entities on the site that are not in the direct line. Like the owners are often brought into these cases. I've represented various owners in these sorts of disputes that are not technically within the line, but still have to show up and defend. Like, listen, we are not a construction company. We are not a GC. Please, please let us out of
Right.
this.
Right. Right.
So, yeah.
As we were getting ready for this, one of the things that you mentioned that intrigued me was talking about the first 24 to 48 hours in investigating claims. And, in my world, and it happens in the trucking world and in the retail world, it's, the rapid response that we learn of an incident and you want to start investigating it from, the first second you learn about it. And, probably just from my own ignorance, I didn't think, oh, that applies to work comp as well. But I guess and you'd had some ideas about what, whether it's the employer or a claim professional or a supervisor or a lawyer, what they need to be doing within those first, the minute they learned about something to the first 24 and 48 hours. What kind of advice do you have for folks who are dealing with those types of issues?
Yeah, oftentimes, because workers' compensation is a no-fault system, it's not immediately a litigated claim. A lot of times when a case gets reported to an insurance carrier by an employer, there's just kind of a claim file set up, and it goes a little while before there's any true investigation into it. And during that time, a lot of information kind of slips through the cracks, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
Um, part of the nice thing about doing construction workers' comp is these systems are often well in place because of the potential for various other claims. But what you really want to have, if at all possible, is a statement from any witnesses within the first 24 to 48 hours, if again, if that's appropriate for your employer, your work site, et cetera, as well as documentation of basically a description of the accident, whether or not any video cameras exist in the place, names of witnesses who are not willing to or cannot give a statement for various reasons. Basically collecting all that information so that when I get the file later, I can follow up on a lot of these things. But if we don't document, if the employer does not document the file or document their file within, the first 24 to 48 hours, a lot of this stuff can be lost, unfortunately.
Yeah, and
Especially
it's
with, yeah, especially with the, video systems that are out there that kind of tape over or dump their data within a fairly short amount of time.
Yeah, and it's like with any other industry, then it sounds like, if you don't have to try to reinvent the wheel or go track down all of these folks and, find out what happened, 6 months, a year after the fact, you've got what they said in the first hours, the first days. And even if they don't remember what they said, well, here was a statement, here was the issue, or here's a video to show what was going on at the time.
Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah. To
yeah,
then to the extent you can, I mean, it can be something as simple as did the person fall onto their left side or their right side? That it doesn't, from a comp perspective, we can say yes, obviously an accident happened, right?
right.
So we're not controverting it. There's no dispute here. This is a compensable claim. We're gonna set up the claim. We're gonna pay for benefits, et cetera. But 5 months from now, 6 months from now, as you said, the claimant starts alleging that not only was their back hurt, but also their, let's say, right shoulder. And if we don't have the information about the specifics of the accident or the fall or whatever it is, whether or not they fell onto their side or reached out and caught something with one of their arms, or they complained, even if they complained of any, pain in the right arm at the time of the accident, it's much harder to controvert the claim, or not controvert the claim, but defend the claim, I should say,
Gotcha. Right.
for those particular body sites.
Right. And I know we've spent a lot of time on construction, and I want to get to a couple of the other areas that you practice in with the work comp or the other industries, but any trends that you're seeing in the construction specifically that you're either concerned about or that you want folks who practice in that area to be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things I'm seeing recently in the construction world is out of a lot of the union shops, the higher paying shops, we're seeing at the end of claimants' careers that they're filing occupational disease cases. And
Gotcha.
so they're not cases for lost time necessarily. They're typically cases that involve extremities, like arms, legs, knees, shoulders, hands, wrists, feet, etc., that are payable out in schedule loss of use payments. And these are extremely high value claims in the workers' compensation field. I mean, we're talking someone who is earning well over $2,000 a week that is being paid out at the maximum rate under the workers' compensation law for these scheduled loss of use claims. And we're talking just in indemnity benefits alone, 300 to $600,000. That is
Right.
all falling on that last employer. And so this is something that I think is going to have to be addressed within the next few years because it is, in my opinion, getting a bit out of control. So
Gotcha. And again, I know that I don't want to pigeonhole you into the construction. You mentioned that you do retail, hospitality, work comp claims as well, and then PEOs. Is there any take in whichever order you want, but is there anything unique about those industries or different challenges that are different from the construction areas that we've talked about?
yeah, the PEOs, professional employment organizations, are particularly interesting, basically because you're dealing with first a whole bunch of different industries to begin with. You get a claim in from a PEO, and could be manufacturing, it could be construction, it could be retail, it could be absolutely anything. So you don't know what's coming in
Right.
the door. But with that said, what's kind of interesting about those cases is you have both the PEO organization that you're dealing with, as well as the employer that's leasing the employees, right? So you have two different organizations you're kind of um, dealing with their own that are dealing with their own processes surrounding the accident. Now they do their best to sync these things up. They do their best to kind of make this an integrated process so they can have the claims flow through them. But you are dealing with two kind of separate entities. In addition to that, you have kind of a unique area where you're going to be dealing a lot more with the contracts, both the insurance contracts and what they actually cover, what employees they actually cover, and whether or not the employee falls within the insurance policy for the PEO, as well as the underlying contract between the PEO and the client company.
Gotcha.
Um, so you get into a little bit more of contractual analysis and whether or not that employee falls within that program, which is kind of fun and interesting in its own way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this has been fascinating for me because, like I said, I don't have a whole lot of experience doing. Well, I don't have any experience handling work comp claims. Everything I've done has been tangentially, and in my head, it was like, well, it can't seem that difficult because you're looking at what part of the body was injured and what percent disability and what's the rate, and let's multiply it out and move on down the road. But this has been fascinating to find just there's a multitude of different avenues to explore and a lot of different issues that you've got to wade through as you get these claims in the door and start processing them and analyzing them. So appreciate your insight on that.
Yeah.
One of the other things, like when I look at civil litigation, I look at 99% of your cases settle. You don't have a lot of trials. Almost everything is geared towards settlement. Is that somewhat similar in work comp as well, or are you seeing more trials or things going all the way through the administrative process?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the best practice, in my opinion, is to try to settle the cases,
Right, right.
because that gives you finality. In workers' compensation, at least in New York, and I think this is probably true across the nation, but at least in New York, unless a case settles, it's never truly closed, right?
Gotcha.
So it's still out there. It still has the potential to be apportioned to later down the line if there is another workers' compensation injury. There still be a revival in treatment, a revival for claim for lost wages, et cetera, if it is not truly closed. So if a case is not settled, you always have that kind of like hanging out there. That being said, there is nothing that requires a claimant to settle a case. So if they don't want to settle a claim, they don't have to. So what I really how I try to approach the settlement process is thinking about it from basically the perspective of what does the claimant actually want? I mean, if you
Right.
can't get into their shoes and you can't understand that, you're not going to be successful in trying to settle the cases. Does this mean they need to, I don't know, leave the medical open or have an annuity for their future medical? Are they concerned about what closing the medical component of the workers' compensation case it means for them long term? Are they concerned about, 15 years from now? Are they going to have to pay for a shoulder replacement surgery? And then approach that with the mindset of, okay, how can we alleviate these fears? Do we do an MSA an MSA that's open for them to administer? Do we want to
Right.
professionally administer one? Will that make them more willing to to settle the case and feel more comfortable about settling the case? So within within settle, the workers' compensation setting, I think understanding that and understanding the claimant you're dealing with and their concerns is extremely important in how you approach the matter. And these conversations can really I think can really help you close cases that would otherwise remain open for years.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's great insight. And I like that approach of whether, and I think it's universal across any practice area, when you really start digging in with your clients is what's your end goal?
Yeah.
What is your true objective here? And then kind of working backwards from that, not going in with our own perspectives of, well, this is what I think should happen. This is how I'd attack it. Because if my goal is one, goal A and you have goal B, and we're this, different clients, your approach may be completely different. So I think that that's, extremely valuable advice for anybody listening to this who's at any stage in their career, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The what really got me thinking about that in that context was I got in a series of claims that were extremely old. They were from the special funds in New York, and they were cases from the 70s and 80s and early 90s. Some cases older than me. And these cases had remained open for decades at this point. And
Right.
what I basically did was in some cases in some of these cases the attorneys that had represented the claimants had died, or they were no longer represented because the firms had closed. And I just called them up when they were unrepresented and just talked to them. Say, hey,
Right.
yeah, you have this old case. What you're receiving what the time was like statutory minimum of $50 a week.
Right.
I know you're used to this. I know you're used to this whole thing, but maybe there's a way that can we can both benefit from resolving this matter. If you pass away tomorrow, your relatives are going to get nothing. This is only open as long as you are alive. If we settle this now, you have the peace of mind of knowing that the money we've paid out to you in this settlement is going to go to your estate, your relatives, your family. So, I mean,
Right.
that was a really that whole process was really eye-opening for me, and
Right.
wonderful experience in my opinion.
Right. Right. Well, Stanley, I really appreciate you giving us that insight into the work comp arena and specifically in New York. It's been eye-opening for me, and certainly will no longer have just that ignorant position of, oh, it's relatively easy. All you have to do is look at the body part. So I appreciate all of your insight there, and I think it comes across in the thoughtfulness of your answers and how you approach these things that you are giving a lot of thought to each particular claim, to your client's needs, to what's the overall objective. And like I said, that's just invaluable advice. So I know I'm smarter for having listened to it, and I think a lot of our viewers are as well. But with kind of a little bit of the limited time we have left, just wanted to find out, what are you doing with your summer? You guys taking a big trip? You've got sports. I mean, what's going on in Buffalo this summer?
Yeah, so actually, I just got back from a family vacation, but to the Shenandoah Valley. We every year my family, my extended family, so my parents along with my sisters and my immediate family, my wife and kids. We take about a week-long trip to somewhere, usually drivable because
Right.
we've got young kids, and spend a week together in some Airbnb. And this year we went to Shenandoah Valley, stopped on the way down at Gettysburg, which was an interesting and fun experience to go through that, and had a nice time though down in Virginia there, and yeah, so that's what we're doing
Yeah.
yeah, fun thing we do every year for that
Yeah,
is
that's awesome.
we do a family Olympics, which is yeah, we a bunch of different competitions, and we crown at the end of it the number one Evans. So this year my brother-in-law won, but
Oh,
yeah, so he'll be lording that over us for a year. But,
oh, that's a lot of fun. Those family traditions are fun.
yeah.
With the last question I'll ask you, and I was debating between two. The one that was in my head is, is Buffalo ever going to win a Super Bowl and overcome the Chiefs? But since we've gotten along so well, I'll set that one
Mhm.
aside,
All right.
and I'll ask what's probably a more controversial question in Buffalo, which is, what Buffalo location, what restaurant, bar, whatever has the best wings?
Okay. So, and I apologize for the long answer here because I do like discussing this. So most people who will recommend, most Buffalonians will recommend Duff's, and they
Okay.
make excellent wings. A lot of them poo-poo Anchor Bar, which is the original founding one, but I actually like Anchor Bar's wings better than Duff's. That being said, you go to almost any bar or restaurant or pizza joint in Buffalo, they're going to have good wings. My personal favorite is Wellington Pub. It's actually, a walking distance for me, and they make a spicy barbecue wing that I absolutely love. And always, just for everyone, always with blue cheese, never with ranch.
You are anticipating my next question, and what actually what I was gonna ask was, now does a Buffalonian eat their wings naked or with blue cheese?
Yeah, that's up to the individual. It's just not with
Okay.
ranch. Ranch is completely inappropriate. Get out of here with that.
Right. It's like the old ketchup on your hot dogs if you're in Chicago.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Stanley, you've been more than generous with your time. I do appreciate all the insights and analysis and the conversation. I know I'm certainly smarter for having listened to it, and I know our viewership will as well. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. And thank you everybody for listening. This wraps up another edition of US Law Live, the official podcast of the US Law Network.